Welcome, everyone. Once again, my name is Maritza Adonis, and I serve as the Global Advocacy and Diplomacy Working Group Chair. Today, we're hosting our 7th session for our FSO 101 series, Foreign Service Officers Debunking the Myths. Today's session is going to focus on our consular session, and please note that the visions and opinions that are shared in today's webinar does not reflect the positions of the United States government or the State Department, and that each diplomat will be speaking in their personal capacities. I'd also like to thank our former founder of WCAPS and our executive director, Jenkins, who allowed us the opportunity to even host such a series, and our current executive director, Shalonda Spencer, who allowed us to continue the series under her leadership. This session has been sponsored by some amazing diplomats that reached out into their respective networks to ensure that we could bring in these amazing, distinguished diplomats for today. So thank you so much, Diplomat CB Tony and Diplomat Victoria Durgana Latortue. So to get us started, I would like to formally introduce to you our distinguished guests for today. Diplomats Ngutter and Diplomat Zeini, are you live and ready to get started?
I am. Yes, absolutely.
Fantastic. So let's get started. All right, we have a couple questions that are coming in already. So for Q&A, I'll ask that you use the Q&A function that is a part of the webinar. So if you actually look at the bottom of your page, if you're on your computer, you can click on Q&A and submit your question. If you're on your phone, it'll be on the 3 dots on the right-hand corner. If you click on those 3 dots, it'll give you the options for a Q&A. And we will close the survey in about 30 seconds and begin our program officially. So we'll give you guys about 30 seconds to wrap up. I see there's a lot of engagement in a chat box and quite a few folks who have just joined us as well. If you're just joining us, we're just having some folks to complete the survey, which will close in about 30 seconds. And in the chat box, you can share with us where you're joining us from. We have some folks from Spain. Wow, that's one of the cool things about GAD is that our membership is actually pretty international. So it's not uncommon for us to have attendees from all over the world. So we have from Greece, from Spain, from Bhutan. We have folks that's from Maryland, the DMV area, Detroit, and you can also put your language competency as well too in the chat box. So what languages do you have some experience with, so that we can know if we can tap into your expertise for our future programming. All right, we have about 15 seconds remaining. All right, so we will go ahead and get started with our first guest diplomat for today, Diplomat Dorothy Ngutter. Diplomat Ngutter, thank you so much for joining us today. As you all saw, she has an amazing background, diverse background in the consular affairs, whether it was in her service, serving as diplomat in residence, or actually dealing with a lot of consular issues. And in her most recent post, so congratulations of Mac Ngutter, where she manages an entire corps that manages consular issues. So specifically, Diplomat Ngutter is actually serving as Consul General right now, her new role, for the consulate in Merida, Mexico. She started this a couple months ago. She's a current Foreign Service Officer where she most recently served as the Director of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Section of the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan. In this role, she managed border security and justice sector programs. In the past, she's also served as Deputy Political Counselor for the United States Embassy in Turkey, as Public Diplomacy Officer for the U.S. Mission in NATO and Belgium, and in roles of Consular and Political Officer in U.S. Embassy in Mali. In Washington, D.C., she's worked as Special Assistant to the former Undersecretary for Political Affairs, Ambassador Burns, and as the Peru Desk Officer in the Office of Andean Affairs, and as Watch Officer in the State Department Operations Center. Her other domestic assignments include serving as diplomat in residence, where she was primarily responsible for the outreach and recruitment of diverse candidates for the Pacific Northwest region. For those of you that have so many questions about the recruitment phase, we're honored to have Diplomat Ngutter, who can share some insights into that. Diplomat Ngutter actually joined the U.S. Foreign Service in 2002 after she completed the Pickering Fellowship Program. Diplomat Ngutter holds a Master of Arts in Law and Diplomacy from the Fletcher School at Tufts University and graduated summa cum laude with a dual Bachelor of Arts degree in Political Science and Communication Studies from Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. She has studied Turkish, Spanish, and French. We have had both Spanish and French Gatlingos, not Turkish just yet. So we may reach out to you again, Diplomat Ngutter, to join us for maybe perhaps a Turkish Gatlingo. So thank you again for joining us today. And we'll actually have you get started just because you have just a wealth of diversity of experience. You've almost covered almost all the cones. So you could cover all of the cones for our attendees for today. But to get us started, I want you to actually talk about, from your experience as a resident diplomat. So half of our attendees are actually in that process. So many of them may have taken the most recent FSOT, are browsing through the application to see if they're really interested in becoming an FSO, or they're actually in the next phase. So from your experience as a resident diplomat, can you walk us through what the recruitment phase looks like to become an FSO? And as you walk us through that, you can throw in some advice for some of our aspiring diplomats as to what are some of the application tips and tricks that you may also have for them as well too. So I'll turn it over to you, Diplomat Ngutter.
Thank you very much, Maritza. I appreciate it. I'm coming to you all from a hotel room, so I apologize for the background as we have it. It is what I could manage in 10 minutes in between another meeting, but really happy to be here. And, as you mentioned, I was a former diplomat in residence. I feel like besides that role, have been recruiting my whole career for the Foreign Service, but really just trying to match people with what they like to do and what they really are passionate about doing. And so I'm really pleased to be here with you all and happy to answer questions. And in fact, I will try to make my remarks short so that we can get to some of the questions that you all have. As a diplomat in residence, your purpose is to connect with aspiring applicants out there. And so the program did start out mainly focused, I think, on college campuses to take a look at students who might be looking for careers and offer them the opportunities to do some studying abroad, some language programs and other things that would help them have an entree into the field. When I did the Diplomat in Residence program, it really was a shift in focus. Yes, we still focused on those aspiring FSOs that were coming out of the academia and coming right out of school, but we were also looking at people who are mid-career and maybe they've always had a passion for languages, they're always really wanted to work and do public service, but had never really connected that and found a way to do that. So what I would tell them is, listen, it's never too late. You can still take the FSOT up until I think it's 59 and a half still, that you can take the exam and go through the process to become a diplomat. And, I think some of the tips for folks, I would say just really look for what it is that you want to do and you're passionate about doing as you're researching what the Foreign Service is, because I'll be very honest, I didn't know about it until I kind of fell into it. But as you're researching, what's a good fit for you? Is it being a political officer? Is it being a public diplomacy officer? Do you like being in front of the camera? Do you like being a public diplomacy officer, but behind the scenes, preparing leaders to speak? And so what is it that speaks to you? And since we're talking about consular today, I really do want to underscore that I think consular work is some of the most important work that we do as diplomats. The Foreign Service asks you to do a consular tour early in your career. Sometimes we end up doing 2 tours in a row. And it really is the support to American citizens who are overseas, either traveling or resident, but it's also the interface with that country and those who are seeking to come to the US for business, as students, for tourism. And so that is the face of America in many ways. And that may be the face that very few, the only face that foreign audiences might see. I'll end here with a little bit of a tip. Research what you want to do. There's a lot of information out there now that did not exist when I was looking. Before, it was paper books in a library that you had to go dig up from the bottom of the pile because nobody had looked at them in a long time. You now have careers.state.gov. It's got the whole plan laid out for you. You can connect with your local diplomat in residence, and shout out to CV Tony, who's down in Florida, because he's doing that recruitment and providing that information for folks. So there's plenty of information out there. And I would really encourage you to figure out which track or cone works best for you, but to understand that at the end of the day, in a crisis, we're all consular officers, right? We're all there to help American citizens to interface with the country and provide assistance. And so I think it's a very important track.
Thank you so much for providing that insight. Careers.state.gov has actually come up quite a few. So most of our attendees who've been part of our previous sessions have been going to that. There's actually an exam on there, like a quiz that they can take in order for them to just kind of test out to see where their interests may lie. So quite a few of them have taken advantage of that. And if this is your first time, that's a great resource. And what we do after each of our sessions, for those of you who have attended, we will send you some of the notes from this meeting so that you guys can have that running list of resource that you guys can refer back to get more insights and information. Thanks so much for providing that. So most of our attendees are also interested in becoming a consular officer. So can you maybe just set the stage for us on what is a consular officer and what are some of those examples of issues that a consular officer may see across their desks from day to day?
So consular officers work on different issues. First and foremost, visas, as I mentioned, for a host country. And so you're seeing everybody from the business people who come before you looking to deepen those economic ties. You're seeing the student who wants to go study because they've gotten a partial scholarship or maybe even a full scholarship, or have a dream of going to university and getting a higher education. You're seeing cases of people who just want to go visit, right? I can't tell you how many people would come up to my window and say, I want to go to Disney World and I really want to go see it. And so on the visa side, you're doing what we call non-immigrant visas. So these are visiting visas, but there are also immigrant visas, which mean that you're intending to immigrate to the US. And so those visas are for people who are coming to join family members. The most famous one that I think you all are familiar with is, the 90-Day Fiancé show that features the K-1 visa, which is when an American gets engaged overseas and they have their spouse that's intending to come and join them. Now, that may not be the best example, but that's the difference. So for non-immigrant visas, you're coming for a short period of time to study, to visit, maybe to do an exchange program. And then for immigrant visas, you're intending to come and live because you have some tie already to the US. On the opposite side, you have American Citizen Services. So everything from passports to renewing passports to working on, people who have been jailed and you have to go provide them some support and services there, to working with people who are having medical emergencies, to having, a plane crash or a hurricane. I just arrived in Merida and my first week there was a hurricane that was coming through here. And so figuring out if people are safe, making sure people are safe and providing services if they're not, connecting families, that is the role of a consular officer. And there's no 2 days that are alike. And so, I often tell people you can wake up thinking you're going to work on one thing, and then, that hurricane or the plane crash or some natural disaster or other natural disaster comes through, and you have to jump into action as a consular officer. So those are consular issues at a glance, but there are many more sort of details to all of that.
Yes, and we'll have lots of opportunities to dive into those, because I see a couple of questions already about the different examples. And we have, of course, our other diplomat, Zeini, that's here with us that works as a consular officer. So we'll have an opportunity to dive a little deeper into
Sure.
that. Before I actually move over to Diplomat Zeini and introduce her formally to our program, Diplomat Ngutter, can you share with us your FSO journey? That's always the biggest question that our attendees have. And even today, from our results from our survey so far, that's the topic that they're most interested in. What is the actual journey of women of color as FSOs? So can you walk us through your journey from the first time, whether it's your fellowship or the first time you realize you want to become an FSO, all the way through your new consular post in Merida, Mexico?
Sure. And again, I'll try to be brief because I do want you all to have a chance to ask questions specifically about all this. When I was an undergrad, I started out as a communications major, thought that's where I was going to go. I wanted to do maybe, journalism. And so that's where I initially entered and thought I would go with my degree. But pretty soon, probably after my first year, I found that all my electives were political science or international relations. And so I did the thing that made sense, which was try to make my money work for me, and did a double major with political science. All along, I'd been wanting to do a study abroad. I'd taken Spanish in undergrad and rather in high school, and I decided to do a study abroad to Spain in my junior year, which was really interesting and sort of cemented that international sort of bent that I already had, but I didn't know what to do with this career. So I finished school, found a job locally with an NGO in Massachusetts that worked with immigrants and refugees. It was entry level, and therefore at an NGO, that meant I was still living at home and then trying to pay bills and work on these issues, but very interesting issues at the time because we had an influx of Central American population from Honduras after Hurricane Mitch. And so I started even then to learn the connection between crises abroad and what that means for immigration and our country. And so that was an interesting time doing that. And I knew I wanted to continue to work overseas. So I applied to go back to graduate school. I figured that was the best way to sort of, get an academic foundation. And as I was applying to graduate school, I stumbled onto Woodrow Wilson Foundation, which had listed a graduate foreign affairs fellowship on their website. And since I already was doing essays and was preparing, I went ahead and applied. And as I would say, the rest is history. So this was a career I would have been interested in, but I didn't know about. And as I said, you have so much more information at your fingertips out there. I started out working in Mali. I did consular work there, as I said early on, very different from where I grew up. I have a Kenyan father, so I grew up for part of my formative years in East Africa. So I had to learn just how to be a diplomat in West Africa and also learn about West Africa as well. I'm a political conned officer, so here masquerading as a consular officer, but I have done consular work throughout my career. And so as I went through my career, there were always items that brought me back to what is the core of the US mission, which is to support Americans overseas. And so even in the other roles that you see there in my bio, always came back to that role. And then my current role as the Consul General here, consulates exist to support citizens and to further US ties within a certain area. And so for us, furthering our ties here on the Yucatan Peninsula, there's been a consulate here since 1843. So we had economic interests, so you further those economic interests, but you also support the Americans that are here. We have, given our location, with the popular Cancun and Playa del Carmen area, about 9 million American tourists that come pre-pandemic to the peninsula to visit. And so they'll lose passports, they'll have issues, they'll get robbed, so you have to support those American citizens that are traveling here. But there's an important community also of Americans who are resident here. And so some have moved here actually during the pandemic and become, digital nomads. So what are the services they need? So figuring that out for the consulate is a really important part of what we do, and providing service to all citizens, whether it's something from a lost passport to repatriation of remains should they happen to pass away overseas, fits into all the things that we do as a consulate and the consular services that we provide here.
Thank you so much, Diplomat and Ngutter. This is a great segue into formally introducing our consular diplomat, Marwa Zeini, who currently serves as the visa chief in the Consulate General in Montreal, Canada. She has worked with the United States Department since 2007, serving in Mexico, United Arab Emirates as a consular officer, and in DC as an early level career development officer. And she also served as a consular training instructor. So this is probably the best expert that we could bring on board for the consular cone. She's also worked as a consular chief in Algeria. And before joining the United States Department, Diplomat Zeini worked as an attorney in Orlando, Florida. She is married and has one daughter. Welcome, Diplomat Zeini. So we're talking about the journeys to becoming an FSO, and I see that you're an attorney like myself. So can you share with us your FSO journey from perhaps say pre-law or maybe before pre-law, all the way through your existing role as visa chief in the consulate in Montreal, Canada?
Definitely. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. So my journey is very unique. I would say it started in the embassy in London as a visa applicant. I actually, my father had a PhD. He applied for a job in the United States. He got his PhD from Scotland. So I grew up in Scotland. And then he got this job offer, and the first step was to get a visa. And so we all dutifully went to the embassy in London to apply for his work visa. And we were accompanying him. And I was 18 at the time. And I remember that experience very well. I remember the interactions we had with the consular officer at the window and how pleasant that consular officer was. So that was my first interaction with the State Department to begin with. And so we came to the United States on work visas. My dad did. I completed college in the United States. I went into law. I worked for a corporate law firm initially for the first year after law school. And then 9/11 happened, and it kind of changed the world. It changed a lot of things, especially for Arab Americans and Muslim Americans in the United States. And so I decided to go out on my own and practice law on my own to begin with. And as part of that, I did a lot of immigration work, going to DHS as part of the NCERS program, where they brought in lots of people who had foreign visas and did checks with them. I went in front of the immigration courts. I filed petitions for people. And I found that I was approaching people one person at a time, and I wanted to make more of an impact. And I saw some of the rhetoric that was coming both through American media and Arab media, and the so drastically different points of view that they had. And I thought that, I can make a difference representing the United States and in the Arab world, but also in general in the world, as a Muslim American, as an Arab American. And so I was looking around for careers that would help me do that. And I stumbled upon the Foreign Service and took the Foreign Service exam. I took the written 2 times and then the oral once. And and was successful and joined the State Department in 2007. So that's kind of how I got into the Foreign Service.
Wow, that's an amazing story. In our last session last month, we brought in two amazing distinguished diplomats that focused on the public diplomacy and political cones. And one of them shared about their journey also through the eyes of their immigrant parents that really gave them the insights to the Foreign Service, or at least a Foreign Service officer, and then later on in their career realized that they really wanted to also represent America's interests from that lens as well too. So that's also a common question that comes across our sessions from some of our attendees who weren't American, who are from overseas, that moved, became American citizens, and they're wondering, am I still eligible to become an FSO officer? And so it's great that you provided that insight with your journey as well too. Since you have served as a consular officer in UAE, you serve as a consular training instructor in across the board. You've served as consular chief in Algeria, and you're currently working as visa chief in Montreal, Canada. Can you provide us a 360 overview of what is a consular officer, and what does a day in a life look like for you when you were serving as a consular officer in UAE, and then for you now as a visa chief and working in a consulate general in Montreal?
So my first two tours in Mexico and the UAE, I was a consular officer, entry-level consular officer. And in general, entry-level consular officers are the ones who are doing the majority of the visa adjudications. So they're doing the majority of the interviews. They're doing the majority of the American citizen adjudications. So consular reports of birth abroad for babies who are born to US citizens, overseas, passports, and so on. And so your day is talking to people. And they're very short conversations with people. Depending on what service you're providing, it can be anywhere from 3 minutes to 15 minutes, but they're conversations trying to see if that person is eligible for the service that they are requesting. You realize that for each individual, this service can be life-changing. So I realize that every day because, I've been on the other side of the window. Whether the person is coming temporarily to the United States or whether they're documenting their baby as a US citizen, this is something that is monumental for them. So it might be that you're talking to 50 people, 100 people that day, but for each individual, that is something that is very important to them. A lot of it, depending on where you are, might be that you are not going to approve the service that they are requesting. So you might not be approving the visa. And despite that, the way that you treat that applicant at your window really tells them what the values of the United States are, how we treat people, how we interact with people, whether or not they're entitled to the service that they are requesting. And so something that is very important is this mentality of customer service, really being, there's rules and regulations and not everybody qualifies for what they're applying for, but how you tell a person that, I'm sorry, you're not able to get that service is also extremely important. From a day-to-day, as Diplomat Ngutter said, it's very different depending on the day. So in Algeria, I was managing a section and all of a sudden we shut down visa services and, there were no airplanes flying out of that country anymore. And we had to figure out ways of repatriating the hundreds of Americans that were stuck in the country, now not able to leave and go back to the United States. And for the last few months I was there, we were putting people on any airplane that was leaving the country, 2 here on an Italian plane, 10 here on a plane from Germany. And we organized our own repatriation flight that came and took hundreds of Americans out of the country. That is certainly something that you don't expect. There was earlier, a year earlier, there were demonstrations that started to occur in the country. That one of our main responsibilities is to keep American citizens informed of what's going on in a country, and if there's a situation that might lead to them, inadvertently walking into a protest or being in danger. And so that's something that we keep close eyes on and try and make sure that we give American citizens the information they need to make intelligent choices on whether to go to a certain place or not. And so it is very, very different depending on the day, what exactly it is that you're going to be doing.
Wow, that does vary across the board. And I think that's fantastic, especially for folks that are really interested in getting a diversity of tasks on a day-to-day basis. And if you're based in one country, you would want to see a variety of cases. And so this sounds like for someone that's looking to have that experience, the consular section, consular cone might be the ideal one for them. One of the myths that we've debunked almost at every session is whether or not, once you're entering a foreign service, everyone has to go through the consular cone. And that's something that we can chat about in a few minutes when you guys go through some of your myths. But that sounds really exciting to me. I think it's great that you get to have, whether you're helping Americans that are traveling abroad or if you're helping actual citizens of that country to evacuate if there's an issue. The work that you guys do seems like it touches across almost all the cones. So can you perhaps, since this is the last cone, so our last few sessions have actually covered the political, public diplomacy, management, econ cones. And so our final cone on consular affairs, we were wondering does the consular cone touch some of the other cones, or in your experience working across the different embassies, can you give us an example where you had to partner with another fellow diplomat who was working in another cone and what that looked like as a consular officer?
Of course. So we do a lot of outreach. So from the public diplomacy cone, we work very closely with our public affairs officers in every single country that I have been in for multiple things. So working to make sure that our applicants are not subject to visa fraud, answering questions on how to apply for visas. As I said, our duty to inform American citizens of what's going on in a country, and if there is any kind of warnings or alerts or a change in the political or security situation. So we partner a lot with the Public Affairs Office, using Facebook, using social media, sometimes doing radio interviews, doing television spots with regards to public affairs. With our political officers, we actually talk to a lot of people. Our political officers have contacts, but a lot of times we can notice a lot of trends in a country. For example, all of the professionals are all of a sudden applying to the United States to leave the country. What's going on that is leading to this? Or, all of a sudden, people are not coming back that have gone and come back successfully multiple times. What's going on? What's the underlying issues in the country that's causing these phenomena? And so in terms of kind of reporting and having a pulse on what's going in the country, consular officers are actually a lot of times the first section to kind of notice some of these underlying issues with regards to the economy or politics. Our management officers, we couldn't survive without them. They bring us in, they situate us, they get us into our housing. they manage our computer systems, but if they don't work, we can't do our jobs. And so I think we do touch upon everything. And, you know, everybody is a consular officer in a crisis. I mentioned repatriation of our American citizens in Algeria. One of the things that we did was, you know, our political officer went, he had contacts at the airport. So he went and he was negotiating how our planes were going to come in and how we were going to open it up. Our management officers, because they do the mail runs, had those contacts and could talk about the luggage and how the logistics worked. Our public affairs officers were messaging about timing of and how to get in touch with us so that you can get on the plane. And so it was really a whole of embassy approach in order to get one of these repatriations organized and get people on the planes.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you for providing that insight. For many of our past attendees, and maybe there's a couple of them that's attended today's session who either had that you know, sense of, oh my goodness, if I, you know, working as a consul officer means that I'm getting stuck in a particular position. I really want to be a political cone or public diplomacy cone officer or management or econ. And so I really wanted you to kind of provide that so that they can see, you know, not only does the consul officer role, you know, everyone becomes a consul officer. I love when you said that in a crisis, but the consul officer has that unique opportunity to work across all the cones because they're working in close partnership with their fellow foreign service officers in that embassy. And before we go into our myths, which is always the really exciting part of our session, where we give you guys an opportunity to debunk 5 myths that you've heard, and then we'll give our participants an opportunity to ask their questions from there, is can you talk a little bit about the application process? I know you talked about, you know, you were an attorney and then you came back and kind of went through that process. What did that process look like for you? And can you give our participants your top 3 tips for what they should consider if their goal is to become a consular cone officer? Are there any like tips and tricks that they should, you know, inject in their application, Diplomat, Zeini?
Okay. So it's been a while since I applied to the Foreign Service, so things might have changed a little bit. As I said, you know, I took the written exam twice. So, you know, one of the things is persist. You know, if at first you don't succeed, try again. It is a competitive process, and it depends on the group of people you are testing with and not necessarily just on your performance. And so that is a little bit more unique than, you know, being in college and you know, getting a particular grade, and that's what gets you to pass. In terms of tips, I would say be true to yourself. Go in with, you know, understanding what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, and be honest about those things. You know, no one is perfect, and we all understand that. And just having that ability to, you know, speak from the heart, I think is what reaches the examiners when you're doing the oral. You know, I did not rehearse anything. I thought about what I wanted to say. I thought deeply about why it is I wanted to join the Foreign Service and what my goals are and how I wanted to achieve that. But when I came to speak about it, I did speak from the heart and not from a rehearsed speech. And so that's one of the things that I think comes through is passion, you know, a commitment to service, especially in the consular cone. Service is really the bedrock of what you are doing, and then determine what it is that you want to do, right? So what cone is it that interests you? And there might be a couple of different cones that look interesting. but you do come in as, you do come in as a generalist. You do have the opportunity to serve outside of your cone as a generalist, but ultimately, the cone you choose should reflect what it is that your goal is.
Thank you so much for writing those application tips. And I know we have quite a few questions on that. So perhaps you might be able to expand a little bit more about what might be of interest to our participants for today. So the most exciting parts of our sessions, which is the reason why we started, we kept expanding the series because there were so many myths about the Foreign Service, whether, did I need a language, before I joined the Foreign Service? Do I need, I've had 15 years of experience. Is it too late for me to join the Foreign Service? I have kids and a family. I don't think I can join the Foreign Service anymore. Or I've taken an exam twice. I think I've, met my threshold. In your experience, Diplomat Zeini, what are the top 5 myths that you would like to debunk today about the Foreign Service or about becoming a Foreign Service officer?
Well, some of those things that you just mentioned are very, are myths. I think one of the myths that I hear about consular officers in general are, you're not real diplomats. The public diplomacy are the face of the embassy. The political officers are the one who are doing the reporting. So, consular officers are not real diplomats. And my answer to that is, we meet more people in a tour in consular than any other person in the mission. You are interviewing a whole bunch of people from the country every single day. And with each of these people, you make an impression. And the way that you communicate with them, their interaction from first stepping into the, through security into the consular section all the way until they leave, that might be the only time they interact with any Americans. You might be the only American they will ever see in their life because, they were refused a visa, for example. And so you are doing one-on-one communications with these people and interacting with them and telling them who Americans are and what their values are. And that is what a diplomat is. You are learning about the culture, you are teaching about American culture. And those are the exchange that happens daily with applicants is what is part of diplomacy and why we, as a foreign service, have put the consular cone in as diplomats. Our colleagues in other countries don't. They have an immigration service that deals with visa services. They may have a consular service that deals with their citizen services, but we as Americans have decided that this duty is a diplomatic duty because we see the value of it. So that was one of the things that I wanted to debunk. The other thing is the diversity in the Foreign Service. And we are, lagging behind in that, but I think we are making strides in it. I daily see colleagues from different backgrounds, from different, parts of the country, from different ethnicities, from different religions. And we have the most diverse local staff all over the world that we interact with daily. And so I think the ability to bring in so many perspectives to our daily work as diplomats and to inform, therefore, from the bottom up, our foreign policy is also a very important thing that I think we are working very hard towards.
All right, so you gave us quite a few of myths here, well, you debunked quite a few myths for us. We'll actually bring Diplomat Ngutter, who I know who's joining us via phone. I know she's having a couple of tech issues. She is out of the country. And so again, thank you so much, Diplomat Ngutter, for joining us and managing the tech as well too. So we'll actually bring you back for this portion to share your top 5 myths that you've heard about the Foreign Service that you would like to debunk, or just about the profession being as a Foreign Service officer. Debunking and Ngutter, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, Maritza, just making sure you guys can hear me.
Yes, you can hear you okay.
Awesome. Sorry about that. For whatever reason, I'm unable to come back with video at all. I've tried several times, but it did let me at least get on the phone line. So a few of the top myths I would say I've heard, and it just depends on the sector and the people. One has to do with age. A lot of people think if they didn't join right out of undergrad or maybe right out of graduate school that they've missed the boat. And that's not true at all. I think, as I said at the beginning, I would encourage people to consider coming in. And I would actually say, as a colleague, I found that diplomats who came in later had more life experience, and it was helpful, you know, in certain areas and issues with crisis. They had more management experience. So I very much championed those who maybe decided later that was the career path that they wanted to explore. A second sort of myth I would say is that you have to have gone to an Ivy League school. I don't know where that came from, but that seems to have been sort of out there. It could be because, you know, back in the day, you know, yes, most of the diplomats did go to the Ivy League schools. So I tell people, regardless of what school you went to, you can definitely apply, and also regardless of what major you had. That was the other kind of myth I would hear a lot. People would say, well, you know, I worked in the sciences. I'm not sure I can be an FSO. I feel like I need to have had an international relations or political science or government degree. And so those two, I think, are tied. And the answer is no. I worked in US NATO with a guy who had a chemistry degree, I think, undergrad, and he was a political officer working on Afghanistan issues when we met at NATO and during my second tour. So all of that is myths. And then a couple of fun ones to debunk that are myths. One is that you get diplomatic immunity to do whatever you want to do in country X or Y or Z. And you don't have to pay parking tickets and all of that. The truth of the matter is you're actually held to a higher standard. We are expected to you know, pay our parking tickets and abide by the laws within the country where we are. And so, you know, yes, there may be immunity from certain actions in your official capacity, but it's not a carte blanche. And then finally, a lot of people think you're always drinking champagne and schmoozing as a diplomat. That is not true. I have carried bags. I have been note-taking. I've had to hold somebody's bags while they went to do an event on a stage. So as I would say, you know, it's not all glamour, and you got to be in it because you want to be in it.
Thank you so much for writing those amazing insights on debunking some of those myths. I'm actually going to use a little bit of moderator privilege because we have another distinguished diplomat who is here as an attendee. But Diplomat Tony, I actually would like to invite you to share any myths that you've heard or if you've seen that you would like to take the opportunity to debunk for our participants for today as well too. Diplomat Tony, I will provide you the opportunity to share.
No, thank you so much. It's great to be with you all today. I've truly enjoyed the insights provided by our distinguished speakers, providing some lifelong, as I've taken notes, some lifelong guidance for the team. I'm just so impressed by the stick-to-itiveness of maneuvering through the application process, as well as making such a profound impact on our world through the State Department and the roles that they've played. So chapeau to our panelists who are simply truly remarkable people and great mentors. I would say that going similar to what our CG has said, I would say that the notion that we travel around in first class everywhere we go is a right, and people jet around to different assignments all the time. So no, it's economy class unless you like to upgrade, unless you're an ambassador, which I'm looking forward to seeing both panelists in our ambassadorial roles soon. That's going to be in their future. So pleased that our CG was promoted this last time on the list. So we're looking forward to seeing her as an ambassador. But yeah, unless you're an ambassador, business first class, you're going between assignments is a myth. Yeah, it's a lot of coach travel. And there's also something else that is a myth when it comes to assignments and travel and just overall lifestyle. The fact, or maybe the myth that's out there, that you can't have a family when you go overseas, that you have to sacrifice something, and family members are sacrificed, or you can't make special occasions, special dates that are important to all of us around the holidays. That's a myth. We have families that make up a large part of our service. We have eligible family members that work alongside of us every day. 3,000 strong eligible family member force that do remarkable roles, including in the counselor section, providing amazing support and camaraderie in getting our missions done around the world. We simply couldn't do it without our family members. So there is a myth out there that you really can't have a family if you're traveling all the time, every 2 or 3 years, going between post to post. And then there's also a myth out there that the ambassadorial position is the pinnacle of one's service, and we only join to reach that goal of heading a mission as an ambassador. As CG Ngutter mentioned so well, that you have to follow your heart and follow your passion, and that includes your assignments across the various strata. That what you put into the service is what you'll reap from it. And that could be performing various roles across your career that doesn't necessarily result in making it to the ranks and files of the ambassadorial rank. So those are 3 that come to mind.
Thank you so much, Diplomat, Tony, for not only joining us, but for being one of our amazing supporters to ensure that we could have today's session on the consular cone. So thank you so much for providing some of those insights. And so now we'll turn over into our questions and answer session, which we already have about 9 questions that's in the queue. If you would like to submit a question, please go ahead and use the Q&A function that is listed at the top right-hand corner if you're using your phone, or at the bottom of your page if you're using your PC or Mac, and you can submit your questions through there, and we will ensure that we answer your question this evening. So the first question that we have from one of our participants is that they would like to know, do you have to learn the language of the country you're sent to, or is there some sort of training that's provided to you after you have entered the foreign service? And Diplomat, we'll start with you. So I can see you shaking your head. And Diplomats in Ngutter, if you would like to answer the question, you can just put a note in the chat box, and I'll keep an eye out for that. But I'll make sure to moderate properly to ensure that you guys both have an opportunity to answer the questions. But Zeini, I see you shaking your head. Would you like to answer that question?
So we have people joining the Foreign Service with absolutely no language abilities, and people who join the Foreign Service that are recruited for their language abilities. So I came in with the recruitment language program with Arabic, but my first tour was in Mexico, and the Foreign Service taught me Spanish to go and serve in Mexico. Before my tour in Algeria, they taught me French to go and serve in Algeria. And so one of the things with regards to the consular work is we try and interview people in the language that they are comfortable with. And so that means that we try to learn the language of the people that we are going to be interviewing. Now, that might mean that you are going to be learning Farsi to go and interview Iranians in Turkey, or Arabic to go interview Syrians in Turkey, or you may be learning the many versions of the Indian languages, Hindi versus, Punjab and so on, to go and serve in a particular region. And in some places, we are unable to do that, and we rely on translators. But for the majority of our interviews, we do prefer to do those in the local language, and we do train the officers in that language if they don't already have the language in order to do so.
Okay. The second part of that question actually asked about, do you guys have translators on site? And you went ahead and answered that along with that as well too. So thank you so much, Zeini. So the second question that we have is pertaining to the application process, more specifically the FSOT, so the Foreign Service Officer tests. I have taken the Foreign Service Officer test for this is my third time taking the Foreign Service Officer test. Is there a maximum amount of time that you can take the exam? And Diplomats and Ngutter, if you want to answer that, I know you have some experience with recruitment. Any insights on, is there a cap on how many times that one can take the exam?
No, in fact, there's not a cap on it. I think that you have to wait a little bit of time to take it. And for that, I think, I want to say last I'd seen it was about a year, but I need to double check with maybe CB has the latest on that. You have to wait a little bit of time to take it, but there's not a cap on how long you can take it. And what I would say is, do not be discouraged. Most people do not pass the FSOT on the first time. It changes in the mix of questions it has, and it's such a generalized test that it may not, play to your strengths. I remember the first time I took it, it had lots of math and econometrics and regression problems. And halfway through the test, I sort of was like, okay, so this is a try a run, because I don't know any of this. Definitely take a look at where you may not have scored as high. Talk to your local diplomat in residence, whoever is closest to you, and review sort of where you seem to be weak. Either it's not an area you studied, or it's an area you struggle with. And so take a look at that and try to beef up on that.
Diplomat Tony, I'll use another moderator privilege. I know that you are an existing diplomat in residence. Can you perhaps add additional clarity? Is there can you clarify on what's that lapse of time that one must take in order to retake the exam?
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, so CG Ngutter knocked it out of the park as usual. You can take it within a year after the previous time. So it's offered 3 times a year. We've just finished sitting for the exam last week. And so we'll offer it again in February of next year, 2021. And then again in June, 2022, and then again in June, we'll offer it again, and then again in October. So as mentioned, please don't be discouraged with the exam. If you didn't fare well, take it as a learning moment, teaching moment. building from that. And also, I'd say that our civil service offers some incredible opportunities for counselor work. We have 18 counselor agencies around the country. So if you're interested in doing domestic work, please look at our counselor agencies, our passport agencies throughout the country as possible employment into the state the pathways into the State Department overall, not necessarily the Foreign Service.
Don't give away our insights, Tony. That's our next session.
Cool. But I would also mention that we for the specialties we have in Washington, we have amazing specialties as well for the counselor set. So usajobs.gov is a good website for looking at that. But for the test itself, for the the Foreign Service Officer test, 3 times a year. If you don't make it through, as CG Ngutter mentioned, just feel free to take it again. There's also a practice test that was mentioned. Diplomat Zeini mentioned that the practice test. Make sure you take that practice test. I'm happy to put it in the chat, both the practice test and our Diplomat in Residence map. So if you're interested in reaching out to me in South Florida, I cover northern Florida, southern Georgia, and southern Alabama. Happy to speak with you, but I'll put the map in the chat for those who are interested in reaching out to a DIR. Thank you so much again.
Of course, and thank you again, Diplomat Tony. We're really honored to have you to add some additional insights for our session for tonight. And Diplomat Tony, kind of made some foreshadowing into our next session in 2 weeks. So on October 26th, we're actually going to look at an overview of alternative careers across the State Department, such as foreign service specialists. And so you guys will have an opportunity to see what are some other pathways into the State Department outside of the Foreign Service. So some other questions that came up here as well. And Diplomat, you might be able to answer these 2 questions. I'll throw both of them to you, since you had some work experience before coming into the Foreign Service. So the first part of the question is, how many years of experience is required to join the Foreign Service, and what types of experience is a Foreign Service looking for in a candidate?
So there is no requirement for experience to join the Foreign Service. We have people who join right out of college. We have people who this is the 2nd career, 3rd career, 4th career, 5th career for them. I think any life experience helps you in the Foreign Service, because you are going to draw on whatever experience you have in new situations. You are constantly having to adapt to whatever situation you're kind of dropped into. And even if you're doing exactly the same job, so I've been a consular officer now, this is my, the 4th or 5th country I've been in as a consular officer. Each country is completely different. The issues are very different. The applicants are very different. The lifestyle is very different. Where you're going to be living, apartment versus house versus, where you figure in the economic situation of that country is going to be different. And so adaptability and the ability to switch from one thing to another is also something that is very important. And then as you go further and further up into the Foreign Service, you do more and more management of people. And so some experience beforehand does help in that, in the ability to manage people. Having been an employee sometimes is helpful to know what do I want in a good manager? If even if that experience was as, even if you're still in college and you're doing, working as a barista, or all of these experiences are going to help in the customer service, in the ability to talk to people, in the ability to bring that, that knowledge of how to calm down a customer, on how to deal with a difficult person. Whatever experience you bring, I think is valuable.
Thank you for that. And I'll actually turn now over to Diplomat and Ngutter. Since you have, I know you were in the Middle East region and then you just got transferred to the Americas. And this question is targeting more so, they want to know, how do you avoid getting pigeonholed into one region? Is there such a thing as getting pigeonholed into a region?
Yes, I think there absolutely can be such a thing as getting pigeonholed into a region. It happens for different reasons. I think sometimes it can be based on the languages you learn. So I often tell people, you know, if you learn Arabic, you know, you got to take a look at where you use Arabic. If you learn Chinese, you got to take a look at the places you use, you know, where you use Chinese. You're much more competitive for those positions than somebody who may not be in those areas, but you may also get locked into those types of jobs because of the language experience. Now, you know, for that, I would say, you know, go in eyes wide open. My crazy eclectic career is probably a testament to the fact that you don't have to be pigeonholed. What you do need to tell people as you're going from position to position is how it fits. The next job fits into the arc of what you've done and what you want to do. And I would always look at what's the next job that needs to show me this, or you know, have I done program management? Have I done, you know, the human rights work or the bread and butter kind of political issues that a political officer does? And so each time I would bid, I would keep an open mind to which job I ended up in, but would try to think of bidding on the positions, sometimes in very different regions, that would allow me to build that expertise for the next level. And so I would often have people tell me my list of bids looked very strange. They didn't make sense because they were in so many different regions. But I would explain, hey, I want to get this skill set, and these jobs will offer me the opportunity to learn that. And so that's how I charted it. But I do know that there are folks who get concerned about getting stuck in a region. And I think, as Zeini said, do not expect that what you come in with into the Foreign Service is the region you'll focus on. I came in with a background on development issues and Spanish, and this is the first Spanish-speaking post that I've been in. So you can break out of the mold, but then you have to work a little bit harder to tell people why you are a good fit for the job.
Thank you so much for my Ngutter. And there's another question I think you might be able to answer as well too, since you've had a diverse experience working across different regions. And you also served in management capacities as well. The question is, how do you navigate representing the United States abroad when perhaps the country where you are currently based, their leadership or their actions, or maybe even the climate may be harmful to women of color?
I think first you have to acknowledge it and look for allies that within the community, the embassy community, that will acknowledge that. And you have to be, you know, careful because yeah, there are some places that are not conducive to serving to your full potential. But I would say do the research beforehand. Know what you're getting into. I've talked to colleagues who have, you know, are from the LGBTI plus community, and I say to them, if you're going to a country that you know is not an easy country for you to be there, you want to factor that into your bids and your strategy for bidding and your strategy for coping with it. Sometimes you may land in a place and realize it's not necessarily what you thought it was. And so I would say look for coping mechanisms and ways to work with your colleagues, with your supervisors, to make sure you're safe first and foremost, and to make sure you can do the job to the best of your ability. I think it's a powerful message when we send diplomats who don't look like what people expect. And for me, that makes it a little bit, you know, a little bit of a challenge, right? A little bit fun to say, hey, no, this is what America looks like, and I'm your American representative, and you're going to have to work with me to accomplish your goals. Sometimes, you know, it can be tough, but I think there's also something to be said about American values by just being there.
Thank you so much. That was
Okay.
a very powerful response, and it's a question that we get in so many different forums. I'm actually looking at all the questions. We've actually had quite a few that came in within the last couple of minutes, and they all typically have that theme around, you know, what is it like as a woman of color and representing our interests abroad? If America is not necessarily in the best light in that country, how do you resolve some of those issues that you might be personally impacted by, but also have to, you know, show up and do your job, or maybe have to, you know, let the other counterpart in that country understand that you are the face of America as well too. And so I thought you did a beautiful job of just explaining that with, you know, the first part is just acknowledging that, which I think a lot of times, because we can get so emotional about some of these issues, we don't take the time to sit back and look at it from an objective perspective, so that we can, you know, deal with it personally, but also being in that clear mind to also get the job done. So thank you so much for providing that beautiful response. So I'm gonna throw 2 more questions at you again, and Diplomat Zeini, I know I keep sending these to you in pairs, and basically, you talked about earlier, well, in your bio, you read that you're a mom and you're married, you have a daughter. So one of these questions is about, you know, can I be a mother and a foreign service officer? How do I balance traveling with my kids? Do I get to bring them on all my assignments? And the second one is when you talked about your experience, that you actually came to the United States through a visa process with your father. And so they wanted to know, is having a dual nationality, does that negatively impact your ability to apply to enter into the foreign service? So I'll turn it over to you, Diplomat Zeini.
Okay. So yes, I am a mother. My daughter is now grown up and an adult, and just graduated college in May. But when I joined the Foreign Service, she was, I think, 7 or 8. And so, you know, and I was able to take her on all of my assignments. So there are assignments in the Foreign Service that are unaccompanied. Those are known, and they are, and in general, you know ahead of time that you are going to be bidding on one of these assignments if you wish to do so. You are worldwide available, but we still do take consideration into your family situation, medical situations, various other situations, and you have a little bit of control over at least voicing your preferences and what your desires are at entry level, and certainly by the mid-level. That's the jobs that you bid on are the jobs that you are interested in doing and that will further your career. So my daughter was with me in Mexico, in Abu Dhabi, 2 very different places to grow up in, and the advantage of that is she's fluent in Spanish because of her time in Mexico, and so even though she was there for only 2 years, she remained fluent in Spanish. I can't say the same thing myself because I don't use it as much, but she learned it at a much earlier age, and she is fluent in Arabic. And so those are some of the advantages that you have. The United States in general will pay for children to go to school in that country, and will provide housing for you, and will provide the services that you need when you take your family. In terms of balancing, I think, you know, you have to look at different stages in your life, and you will be interested in different things. So when I was younger, I would not have considered an unaccompanied post because I had a family. Other people made other choices. I know a lot of married mothers who have gone on unaccompanied tours for a year. So these are choices that you kind of make with you and your family. And for me, every tour that I come to bid, I sit down with my family and see what our priorities as a family are. And I take that into consideration when I am looking at my next assignment. So sometimes my career takes precedence. Sometimes my daughter or my husband took precedence, and that meant, that I returned to Washington for a period of time because my daughter wanted to finish high school in the United States. That my husband, he worked as an EFM for a while and for about 5 years, and he's a doctor of physical therapy. And so we returned to the United States also for him to restart his career and have a different solution for him so that he can continue a career that he wanted to continue with. And so those are choices that we make tour by tour as a family, as part of our bidding strategy, apart from looking at career goals. For me, is what do we want to achieve as a family? In terms of having dual nationality, the State Department does an evaluation. I can't serve in Egypt because I'm a national of Egypt. I still have roots there. I still have family there, and so I have an assignment restriction. So I can't do work that has to do with Egypt or serve in Egypt. But otherwise, I have a top secret security clearance. I can work on all other issues. I can work. I am worldwide available. I can work anywhere else in the world.
Thank you so much for providing that insight. And Diplomat and Ngutter, I have a double hitter for you as well too. A lot of these cultural questions, I think because of your vast, diverse experience, I think you'll have some really great insights for these questions. And actually, not only have a double, I have probably like 3 or 4. They're more like yes or no questions, and that's because you've done some recruitment, so you might be able to provide like a quick yes or no for these. But I'll give you the heavy questions first. So the first question is, have you ever experienced a crisis while you were at a post? If so, how did you handle that crisis?
So is this a personal crisis?
Well, that's a good question. It looks like it might just be a crisis in the country and or personal. So you can actually handle from both aspects if you have both experiences.
Yeah, I have to say my first tour, I had to be medevac, and it was something that honestly, at the end of the day, didn't end up being very serious. But it's very
Diplomat and Ngutter, can you tell us what medevac is for those of us that might not know?
Medically evacuated from the country so that you can go back and get medical care and attention. Usually what happens is they do that in the case where there's not sufficient medical expertise in the area where you are serving. And so it was something that just kind of persisted for a long time. We couldn't figure out what was wrong. And at the end of the day, my leadership supported me in being able to come back and meet with my doctors and get tested and get, evaluated so that I could get the attention and medical care I needed. It was not serious, but I was glad that in the experiencing that personal crisis overseas by yourself, that I had the support to be able to come back and do that. So that's one of the things I would say, I appreciated, is that there is support for you to be able to do that on a personal level. There's also support for you to be able to go home when things go wrong. My father passed away in 2013, and even though home for me is the United States, he has been in Kenya since I was in high school. So they paid for an emergency visitation travel ticket for me to go back to his funeral, because by the time I was able to go to do that. So personal crises, I think there are options to support staff, and they try to move quickly to make that happen for you during those times. And so that's one thing I would say on just kind of experiencing personal crises. And there are others who have experienced many more sort of issues, divorce overseas and other things they've had to navigate. In terms of crises, I got here August 13th, and less than a week later, there was a hurricane. And so knowing sort of, who you need to contact, what you need to do, how you need to manage, that's one of, the things that you practice, you review. Usually you don't have to put into practice so early on in a tour. But it's one of the more important things that we do to take care of each other and to take care of Americans, in general, as consular officers. The other sort of major crisis for me was being in Turkey and having the embassy while I was there bombed. It was, something that brought home the gravity of the work that we do, and the fact that there is danger in it. I know that it's implicit there in a lot of where we go, but managing again with our country team colleagues, really everybody pulled together to support those local staff, because there were a couple of local staff who did die in that incident. So for me, you manage those crises in a team. And that's what I would say is the embassy, is like a team.
Okay, and a couple of the rapid fire questions here, and I do want to note the time. So we'll, just to respect our diplomats who are in attendance time, our program will close out at exactly at 8:40. So we'll extend it for about 8 minutes just to wrap up a few of these questions, because we have quite a few still in the queue. Some of the rapid fire questions that I think you also in the best position to probably answer as well too, Diplomat and Ngutter, is there currently a hiring freeze for FSOs?
No.
Okay. Do I have to live in DC?
Just quickly so that we can get through the questions. Yeah.
No, that's a good one. These are the rapid fire ones. Do I have to live in DC in order to join the Foreign Service?
No, that's a myth.
Okay. I currently have 30 years of experience working in the arts. Is there an opportunity for me to translate that experience into a career in the Foreign Service?
Yes. It depends on what you want to do. If you want to continue with work that's related to the arts, you might consider public diplomacy, cultural affairs, where there's much more sort of engagement with artists, our old, from the 60s, jazz overseas. These were all part and parcel of the public diplomacy programs on the cultural side that we did. So if you want to continue in that field, you can do that there. But there are many people I've met who want to do an about face. And so they say, this is what I've done, but I want to join and do something completely different. So it depends on the person.
Okay. Another recruitment question. I currently have, so this person has proficiency in Spanish, but they don't want to be placed in any Spanish speaking countries. Do you recommend that they not list Spanish as one of their languages and instead list no languages at all? Interesting question.
I would say put your languages out there as you're applying. One of the things that can be helpful to you is if you test at a sufficient level. When you get to the point at which you're on the register, this is the hiring register, that means you've taken the FSO T, you've done the personal narratives panel review of your application, you've done the oral assessment, you've completed your medical and security clearance, you're put on a hiring register. You do have the option to take language that you are proficient in, and that can contribute to your points and to where you are on the register. So it's up to you, kind of what you want to put out there, but I wouldn't be shy about putting it out there.
Okay, and the final rapid fire question, and I'll turn back over to some questions that both of you guys can answer, is how many times can I switch cones? Is there an opportunity for me to switch cones? And if not, how do I negotiate an opportunity to diversify my portfolio?
So I would say start out picking the cone you want to do. It works out the best for everybody that way. There can be an opportunity to switch cones as you're in the career. It involves gaining experience in the new cone or track, which is the terminology that we should be using. That's the new terminology, but I still have cone. But it takes you longer, and it can kind of slow you down in terms of promotions because you're busy trying to get into a new track or field. So my suggestion is go for the track you want to go for and make the application within that track.
Okay, so this is potpourri questions. We'll start with you, Diplomat Zeini, and I'll ask the remaining questions in either Diplomat Zeini or Diplomat Ngutter can respond to these. The first question of Matt Zeini is, what advice do you have as I'm entering the Foreign Service in the COVID-19 era? Has there been any changes that you've seen as a result of the pandemic that impacts the Foreign Service generally?
There were lots of changes in the Foreign Service during the COVID-19 era. I think we just got our newest officer at post, and she did all of her training virtually during the pandemic, from like A100 through French training, all virtually. There were only even her consular training, I think she said she had 7 days on site for the training and everything else was virtual. And then our training with regards to security, that 1 week course, she had in person. But other than that, for a year, she was doing virtual training. So definitely the pandemic has changed the way we train people. It has shown us that there's a lot of functions that we can do remotely, that previous to the pandemic, we thought that mainly they had to be done in the office. And so I think going forward, that will give flexibility in general to working for the Foreign Service.
Okay, the next question, either for Diplomat Zeini or Diplomat Ngutter, how do you balance meeting the requirements of the Hatch Act? How do you know what to say that's personal versus what should be professional?
So I say very little that is personal, especially when I'm overseas. When I'm overseas, I represent the United States 24/7, and I represent what the United States represents. And so I try to limit actually what I say personally.
How about yourself, Diplomat Ngutter? How do you balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say that it's something similar. When you're, working alongside people, you have to understand that people come with different views and different political views. So you want to be careful, both within the workspace, especially as you become a manager and more senior, about not influencing or espousing your political opinion in a way that makes others feel uncomfortable in the workplace, but then also considering kind of what you say out publicly as well, and on social media platforms, and you name it. So you want to think carefully about that and what you put out there.
Okay, another question that both of you guys can respond to. What is one thing that you wish you would have known prior to entering the Foreign Service? And if Matt and Ngutter, will start with you, and then Zeini can also answer that question as well.
I would say there's no playbook. You just have to get in there and chart your own path. There's no one way to get to where you're going. And so you have to make the decisions that make the best sense for you. You have to evaluate what that is for you and your family and make those decisions. And, you shouldn't consider that, anybody's career is the exact path that you have to follow to make it to ambassador or to make it to whatever your goal is in the Foreign Service. Just hop in and enjoy the ride.
How about yourself, Diplomat Zeini? One thing you wish you would have known prior to entering the service?
Things are unpredictable. Situations in countries change. Your personal situation changes. What you thought you were going to do is going to change. When you land in a country, you might find the security situation has improved or deteriorated. So flexibility really is something that you need to learn, which may mean you don't know when you're going to leave a country because airspace is closed, or when you're not going to be able to go out shopping because there's a demonstration. So remain flexible, remain open-minded, know that you can't plan for everything. Plan, but then expect things to change.
Okay, and our final question to close out the program is, why do you continue to serve as a Foreign Service officer? And if there's any piece of words of advice or any inspiration that you would like to share with our attendees who are aspiring diplomats? Diplomat Ngutter, we'll start with you.
For me, public service is something that's really important. It was ingrained in me from my grandfather being in the military, and he joined the military when it was segregated. And so, he found purpose in the service and he made that. And so for me, in joining public service and dedicating my life to this career, I wake up every day saying, do you still want to do this? And yeah, I want to help people. I want to engage with other people. I like what I'm able to do in this job. And so, as I said, find your passion. And if this is it, go for it.
Zeini, or why do you continue to serve as a Foreign Service Officer, and any words of inspiration for tonight's attendees?
I've had a lot of experiences, personal experiences, helping American citizens overseas, from a mom whose child was abducted to, a victim of abuse, to, forced marriage, and helping people who really don't know who to turn to. And you are the only person that speaks the language that they are familiar with, navigating an unfamiliar country, unfamiliar legal system, unfamiliar everything. And just having someone that they can talk to and that can explain what the process is invaluable. And those cases stay with you forever. And that's what keeps me getting up in the morning and going to work and trying really to serve Americans. And whether it's, uniting a family that's immigrating to the United States, or, helping someone whose passport was stolen, you are making a difference to that person's life.
Wow, thank you so very much for that. Just amazing insights into the world of consular affairs. Thank you everyone for joining WCAPS FSO series session 7 on the consular cone with guest diplomats Dorothy and Ngutter and Marwa Zeini. The series was curated under the leadership of Undersecretary Bonnie Jenkins, founder and former executive director of WCAPS, and continues with the support of our amazing new director, Shalonda Spencer. The session specifically was made possible by the gracious support of Diplomats Victoria Durgana Latortue and Diplomat CB Tony. Thank you so much, Matt Tony, for joining us live for today's session. Don't forget to register for our next session on alternative careers at the State Department on October 26th. We've shared that link with you all in the chat box. And if you're interested in joining our GAD team for 2022, or you're interested in joining our publications team, as we shared at our last couple of events, we're actually going to collect all the myths that we debunk for the Foreign Service and publish a document for WCAPS members and the general public. And we'll actually invite many of our participants to provide some additional insights as well too, and serve as co-authors or editors of that site, of that particular publication, time permitting. If you'd like to join that editor team, please send an email as well to gadwg@wcaps.org. At WCAPS, we believe global issues demand a variety of perspectives. That's why Ambassador Bonnie Jenkins created this amazing platform devoted to women of color that cultivates a strong voice and network for our members while encouraging dialogue, strategies for engaging in policy discussions on a domestic and international scale. Through our membership dedication and our leadership, you'll see that exhibited through the various mentorship programs, our publications, our partnerships through programs such as Stories in Solidarity, and many, many, many more. And so we thank all of you for joining us tonight. Continue to take good care, stay safe, anyone. And again, my name is Maritza Adonis, and I serve as the founder and chair of the Global Advocacy and Diplomacy Working Group of WCAPS, which is the Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation. Have a good evening, everyone. Continue to stay safe. United, we will overcome. Thank you.